Call this meeting of the TRPA Regional Planning Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, and it is 11:10 or so. First item on the agenda is a roll call to determine quorum. Maria?
Ms. Halding?
Here.
Ms. Gustafson?
Here.
Mr. Henigman?
Here.
Mr. Keycapper?
Here.
Ms. Loomer?
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Great. All right, now I will go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For the members of the public who are joining us remotely, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for November 20th, 2024. There you'll find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the raise hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you'll be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you've used a dial-in number to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. For items agendized for action or possible action, we'll hear public comment before the committee takes any action. To remote committee members, if you wish to speak, please also raise your hand in Zoom. You'll find the raise hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or have sidebar conversations. Please remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. And finally, I'd like to ask all remote committee members to turn on their cameras if they're able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment. You'll be called to the front to speak. To ensure that everyone has time to make their desired comments, you can agree with the previous commenter rather than making comments that repeat what others have said. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you're viewing the webinar on a personal computer, let's see where we got this. Please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback into the room. If committee members need to ask clarifying questions during the presentations, please do so, but we'll save our deliberation until after the presentation is complete. All right. Next item is the approval of the agenda. John, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. After item 3, which is on the Chapter 13 amendments, we'd like to do item 5 on the Tourist Core Area Plan, followed by item 4 on the Tahoe Valley Area Plan, because a lot of the information covered in the Tahoe Valley Area Plan will be also covered first in the Tourist Core Area Plan. So with that change, we'd recommend you approve the agenda with that change.
Okay, so wait, can you repeat that? We're doing item 4 before item 3. Is that right?
Item 5 after number 3, and then item 4 after number 5. Just
Okay.
reversing the order of Tourist Core and Tahoe Valley.
5, 4, 3.
It'll go 3, 5, 4.
3, 5, 4. Okay, sorry. I'm realizing we talked about this, but now I'm realizing, yes, I need to make sure that I have this down right. Okay, 3, 5, 4. Okay, perfect. 3, then 5, 4. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So the next item on our agenda is item number 2, approval of the minutes. We have a set of minutes from September 25, 2024 on page 33. Do any members of the committee wish to make a change? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented or as amended. Any changes to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Operations and Governance Committee on October 23rd, 2024, as presented.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope.
I'm sorry.
We're going to correct the motion for a second.
That's right. I was on the wrong page. I apologize. The minutes that we're approving from October 23rd, 2024 were for the Regional Planning Committee, as opposed to Operations and Governance.
Okay, sorry. All right, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, looks like the motion passes. All right, on to the next agenda item, number 3, discussion and possible recommendation for approval of proposed amendments to Chapter 13 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances and the goals and policies of the regional plan regarding the review and potential approval process for local jurisdiction area plans that propose alternate density and height limits in town centers. Information on this agenda item can be found on page 109 of your packet. All right, so Alyssa is going to present this. So Alyssa, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Alyssa Bettinger for the record. I'm here to ask for your consideration on amendments to Chapter 13 of the TRPA Code, as well as the regional plan to address area plans that are proposing greater height or density than what is currently allowed in Chapter 13. Next slide, please. So Chapter 13 of the TRPA Code is our area plan chapter, and it sets forth the height and density limits for area plans. The next 2 items on your agenda are the City of South Lake Tahoe's Tourist Core Area Plan and Tahoe Valley Area Plan amendments. And both of those area plans are proposing residential density increases up to 65 units per acre, which exceed the maximums that are currently listed in Chapter 13 of our code. Local jurisdictions can propose these standards in their area plans that exceed Chapter 13. But we cannot approve the area plan amendments without a TRPA code amendment because the area plans cannot supersede the TRPA code. Next slide, please. So the current process to do this when local jurisdictions bring forward a proposal like this, first the area plans go through the local approval hearing process, and then they come over to TRPA to be reviewed first as an informational item by the Regional Plan Committee. And then the area plans would go through the APC, RPC, and GB approval process. Simultaneously with those area plan amendments, TRPA staff would bring forward a TRPA code amendment specifically for that density or height increase for the specific area plan location. So it's sort of a duplicative process, the area plan amendment and then the TRPA code amendment. The proposed amendment before you today would replace that TRPA code amendment with requirements for local jurisdictions that they need to meet when they are proposing additional height or density in their area plan. There's a couple of reasons why we are proposing this right now. Local jurisdictions, as you know, as I mentioned, the city is the next 2 items we'll be hearing the City of South Lake Tahoe's area plan amendments. They can do this today. They can propose these density and height standards that exceed Chapter 13 today. We do not have a clear process for them to follow and for us to evaluate those proposals when they come to us. And so, you know, we're sort of evaluating them on a case-by-case basis as they come in. This amendment would establish a standardized process and criteria for us to do that evaluation. This also, you know, doing a specific TRPA code amendment for each instance like this results in essentially spot zoning of our code, where we're making an exception for this specific location or site within a local jurisdiction, which is, you know, we would like to get away from. We'd like to have more of a regional code and get away from that. Next slide, please. So this amendment would again establish some criteria and a process for local jurisdictions to follow when they are proposing these standards. For any height or density proposal above Chapter 13, the standards or the proposed policies must further the goals and policies of the regional plan. They also need to demonstrate that there's no environmental impact through the appropriate environmental analysis. And then we're not proposing any changes to the actual area plan approval process itself. So area plan amendments and new area plans would still need to be approved by APC or be recommended for approval by APC, as well as the governing board. And we typically do bring area plans to the regional plan committee as well. And then in addition, for height, any proposals for height over 56 feet that the local jurisdictions are proposing, they need to include findings 1, 3, and 9 in their area plan language. And those findings are specific to, or they relate directly to our scenic thresholds. And so they provide that scenic protection for any buildings over 56 feet. Local jurisdictions must also have adopted design standards if they're proposing these higher heights. And then they also need to not be subject to the density maximums in Chapter 13 if they're proposing residential height allowances. We want to make sure that the density also allows for more smaller units to be built. Next slide. So we have a couple of options for the RPC to consider today. Assuming that the RPC would like to move forward with the City of South Lake Tahoe's area plan amendments as proposed with the density increase in their town centers. The first option is to recommend the amendments that are in attachment B of your packet. This was also what the APC recommended last week. The other option is to recommend a specific amendment to Chapter 13 that would allow the higher density in only in the City of South Lake Tahoe. So instead of this criteria and process that I just outlined in these in the previous slides, you could also recommend that an amendment only apply to the City of South Lake Tahoe to allow for that density. Again, that is assuming that you want to move forward with the city's area plan amendments as proposed, which will be the next 2 items on the agenda. We have received 4 written comments on this item as of this morning. Staff reviewed them. We know that you reviewed them as well. I just want to reiterate that this, again, does not change the current review process for both area plans or projects. So, any projects that would result from higher density or height would still go through the process that it would today. And this does also not change our growth caps. So I know sometimes density and growth caps are a little confusing. And so I just want to mention that our growth caps, we're not proposing any changes to our regional growth caps or development rights. And I'm also happy to answer any questions about those comments. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, we do need to move forward with this amendment, as I mentioned, at the same time as the city's area plan amendments in order for those to go into effect if you should recommend approval of those. So we are planning to bring this forward to the governing board next month, along with those area plan amendments. Next slide. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Do we have any comments from committee members or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Shelley Aldine.
Okay.
So Alyssa, I guess my question is, in the past, the additional densities and height were always associated with affordable housing projects or achievable housing or moderate income, low income. This language doesn't specifically say that. I mean, it just is housing in general. So it could be market rate housing this applies to, correct?
Correct. The city's area plan amendments are proposing an increase in density for non-deed restricted residential housing.
Well, that's where I have a problem. The trade-off was if you are willing to build affordable housing projects and we're willing to go above and beyond what our code permits, in order to make that possible. And I do have a problem with the fact that there's no reference in these amendments to affordability, because I think that was the agreement. In other words, in the phase 2 housing initiative, that it was, these concessions were being made to facilitate the development of affordable housing.
If I can add to that, and maybe ask John Hitchcock to come to the podium. Also part of phase 2, as you recall, Ms. Aldine, is that the local governments would either adopt our phase 2 code amendments or opt out and adopt their own. And my understanding is that the city has adopted some other amendments that include inclusionary provisions, but John could probably clarify that.
For the record, John Hitchcock, Planning Manager, City of South Lake Tahoe. That's correct. I was going to talk about this in my presentation, but I guess I can talk about it now. The city has done quite a bit in terms of advancing affordable housing type projects. We obviously partner with developers to build, for example, Sugar Pine Village, which is 248 units. We have another 78 unit project that's currently in design right now. That will be coming forward hopefully next year in the town center. And we also have adopted inclusionary housing ordinances in order to help fund affordable housing projects in the basin. And then we also taken innovative approaches where we've taken our commodities that we have amassed over many, many years, such as tourist accommodation uses, and we have converted those to units of use, and we offer those for free to people who are interested in developing accessory dwelling units as well as for rent multifamily units, but with market rate. The city's perspective is in our attempt to meet our RHNA goals, which doesn't just mean meeting our affordable housing goals, but also meeting non-affordable housing units such as market rates. The city's perspective is we want housing of all income levels. And so what we're proposing as part of this Chapter 13 amendments, as well as our area plan amendments, is to allow higher density for market rate, I should say, non-affordable housing projects at a higher density in order to incentivize higher density projects that result in smaller units that are more affordable. Yes, some of these units will be market rate. Some may be second homes, others may not. And so from the city's perspective, housing for all income levels is an appropriate thing to do at least in the city of South Lake Tahoe. And we support the proposed amendment to Chapter 13. It creates that flexibility for the city to at least develop a land use pattern that is reflective of what our community wants in terms of density and in terms of land use pattern. And with that, I can answer any questions.
So John, this is not being imposed upon you by the state of California through its housing objectives.
The RHNA numbers are imposed to us by the state of California. Those are, yes.
But RHNA doesn't require second homes.
No, it doesn't. It just
Yeah.
breaks it down to market rate versus moderate versus affordable.
Right. And are you opposed to having a deed restriction for local full-time residents versus additional second homes?
There's no plans to require that deed restriction. What we have done is if an applicant is proposing to use one of our development rights to develop one of these units, we require a deed restriction prohibiting that unit from being used for short-term rentals. We're also proposing other policies and standards in our area plan to restrict the loss of housing units. A trend that we're seeing once Measure T was passed was particularly in our town centers, property owners were converting multifamily units, duplexes and triplexes into single-family homes and then converting them into vacation home rentals. What we're proposing in our area plans would prohibit that. What we're attempting to do is create more housing choices as well as preserve the housing options that we have on the ground today.
Any other questions from committee members?
This is Ben Geekoff. I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Great.
The the process by which the area plan amendments walk through. So for the height variance, I'm looking at the specific height findings 1, 3, and 9 that are listed in the Code of Ordinances. And the in finding 1, relating to the views from a distance of 300 feet, at what step in the process does that get evaluated? Would that be sort of before step 1 of the sort of local planning commission phase? Where does that get incorporated into the review?
So the findings, so the way that we've written the code is that these 3 findings would need to be incorporated into the city's, or not the city's not proposing additional height, just to be clear on that. But if an area plan amendment were to come forward proposing additional height, those findings would need to be incorporated into the area plan language. The findings would actually be applied to the project when it comes forward, depending on whether it comes to TRPA or not. It would be, the project would be evaluated against these findings when it comes to TRPA. If it doesn't come to TRPA because because it could be processed under a local jurisdiction's MOU, then it would be evaluated by the local jurisdiction because these findings would be in the area plan document itself. Is that?
Well, I think so. If we, so under current reviews, would all of these would have to come to, any of these variances would have to come to the TRPA board because it would require an ordinance or a plan change. If we make this sort of blanket change now, the local jurisdiction could unilaterally do it without TRPA approval?
No, the local jurisdiction would need to come to TRPA with the area plan amendment itself for approval. And at that time, these findings would need to be included in the area plan language.
You indicated there was some scenarios where due to an MOU, the local jurisdiction could make their own determination without our review. So would that
Right.
not include these instances where there would be variances to height or density?
So there's 2 kind of distinct processes here. One is the area plan amendment itself, and then the second is the project approval. And so the area plan amendment, regardless, would need to come to TRPA for approval. That, yeah, and we're not changing that. The project, it's dependent on whether or not the local jurisdiction can permit that project under their MOU. So that may come to TRPA, it might not.
So if we approve this process for the plan amendment, right, and then a local jurisdiction submits a plan amendment, which contains this new process, then they have MOU authority. Any individual project that may exceed density or height, they could approve without coming back to TRPA.
If it falls
have it.
within their MOU, correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments from committee members?
Yes, Vince Shelley Aldine. So paragraph 5A, the alternative standards are consistent with, and these are the findings that have to be made, are consistent with and further the goals and policies of the regional plan. And it was suggested that that specifically refer to the housing sub-element. And I have the housing sub-element in front of me, and it is focused almost entirely on affordable housing. I'm trying to think of a reasonable way of giving the local jurisdictions some latitude, but not, doing something that is inconsistent with our emphasis. And by the way, congratulations that you're meeting your numbers. I think that's great with respect to affordable housing projects. I'm just a little concerned about, opening this door, because I'm not sure that and John, maybe you can answer the question. I haven't had a chance to refamiliarize myself with this housing sub-element, but, most of these provisions relate to affordability. So if we make reference in 5A to the alternative standards are consistent with the goals and policies of the regional plan. And people have asked, what does that mean? And the intent, I think, of staff is to specifically reference the housing sub-element. But again, the housing sub-element relates largely to, low income, moderate income. I'm not sure it lists, may reference of achievability as well. But
Our intent there is because that's one of multiple steps you have to go through, is that's one of them. Because people have said, well, this issue's come up. Well, when you say you're going to check it against the regional plan, what are you going to check it against? We're going to check it against everything because we do that. But we wanted to focus people specifically on the housing as one of where they need to spend a little more time. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Well, it does. It answers my question about subparagraph C too, because I mean, we're only in that paragraph, the only specific reference is to findings 1, 3, and 9. But there are a total of 18 findings under 37.7. But for example, it doesn't refer to things like site design. I mean, you and I had numerous conversations about solar exposure and how we were going to prevent this tunneling effect, with buildings that are too high and they, impede the sunshine from falling on adjacent buildings. And so we've called those findings out specifically, but it's all inclusive when we review these projects.
It is, and also the provision for design standards is intended to address that as well. And
Okay.
part of what you're asking, I think, refers back to Mr. Keykeper's question is, and maybe this is just background we should have included in the presentation, is what and some of you already know this, what we do is when an area plan is approved, we can sign an MOU with local government to allow smaller development. There's a cap on what size in the regional plan, but smaller developments they can permit on our behalf. And so what we're saying is if you're going to permit on our behalf, you have to specifically include in your regulations those same findings that we use, that ones Shelley was just talking about. So that's really all that is. It doesn't, if it's bigger than that threshold, which is in, I think, land use policy, I can't remember but it says certain size, a certain number of units, then we make those findings because it's in our code. So that's all that really is. It's just making sure that local governments are looking at the same things we do regarding height. I hope that clarifies. Addresses Miss Aldine's questions as well, I hope.
So along those lines, John, I'm still a little confused. Under this new provision, it says TRPA may approve height standards above the maximum set forth. And there's a reference to the table in town centers, area plan proposals to exceed density or height standards consistent with this paragraph may be approved. It's not obligatory, it's permissive, but we still, when an area plan, even if we adopt this language, if an area plan comes before us that's consistent with this modified language, we still have the flexibility and to refuse to approve it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're maintaining that ability. And then design standards. So obviously the local jurisdictions have adopted design standards. If those design standards are inconsistent with the design standards in, what was it, F1? Community design standards in our plan, I'm assuming that our design standards preempt their design standards, right? If there is an ambiguity or if there's an inconsistency.
Usually in the area plan, their design standards will be more specific than ours. To give you a real example, say you're concerned about solar being blocked. When an area plan comes forward, like you will here in a few minutes, it's perfectly within your purview to say, show me in your design standards where you've addressed solar accessibility or step gradient. One of the things we talk about a lot is gradients from lower height areas as you move into higher height areas. are those in there? Show me, and if you don't feel like they're adequate, you can say, we're not gonna approve this area plan until you address that. That's certainly within your purview. I think that's a real life example
Mhm.
of what you're driving at.
Right, but again, if there's an inconsistency, I'm assuming our design standards, if there's a conflict, our design standards, if they're not, if their design standards are not stricter, our design standards would prevail.
We by the compact have to go with the stricter of the two.
Right,
Which Graham can
Yeah.
describe better than I can probably, but we can, in the area plan, say this design standard applies versus that. In effect, that's what you're doing with this amendment, because you would say, if you bring me an area plan and I'm satisfied that it meets all these criteria and it allows more height than the table in chapter 13, and it's in a town center or a regional center, we're going to approve that area plan, which gives you more height. So the way the area plans work is they're more specific, but you have to find before you approve them that they're consistent with the regional plan. Is that?
yeah, no, that answers my question. And I'm not specifically pointing a finger at the city of South Lake Tahoe or any of the local jurisdictions, but how do you deal with a situation? I mean, these projects as they come forward are not going to be reviewed by TRPA, are they? In other words, what is the level of review by TRPA if a project comes in and they're using the additional height that this would permit?
It would be specified in the MOU, but there's a maximum we can put in an MOU. And I think it's it's in the land use policies, the regional plan. I don't have it in front of me, but I can find it real quick if you want me to.
Well, I just want to make sure that we have some built-in safeguards, because
We
once
do.
a building is built, if it's not compliant, I don't think that we have ever required that a building be demolished.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's my concern. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not suggesting this would ever happen. We have some very responsible people running our local jurisdictions, but I am concerned that the perception is once the horse is out of the barn, it's awfully difficult to, there's no reason to close the door. So.
Mr. Chair, Vince, this is Julie Reagan. If I could, may I just jump in to build on this? And I appreciate the questions of the board and wanted to give a little more context from our advisory planning commission meeting. John Hitchcock participated in that. And, this is very technical. And I think it's important that we, answer these questions. If we go back to the slide with the options, as a result of, public comment, which we've listened to and taken seriously, the discussion at the Advisory Planning Commission, we wanted to give you more than just one option, to move forward. Because hearkening back to the discussion around the IPES, the individual parcel evaluation system, it's important just from a macro level to think whenever our executive staff at TRPA even have conversations about things like IPES. It sends signals to the market, to the community. Our phone's been ringing off the hook about IPES. Is TRPA going to let people build on 0 IPES scores now? No, we don't build in wetlands, but some people don't catch all the nuance and all the background. And this could have, potentially an unintended consequence to send a signal that we're looking for more height or density throughout the basin, not tied to affordable housing. I think, Shelley, as you're rightfully bringing forward. So we wanted to give you a couple suggestions. There's two pieces here. There's height and density. The density is what is wrapped up in the area plan that you'll be hearing, in the next items. You could limit this if you wanted to move this forward. So we just wanted to bring these options to you to think about today. Because it has raised a lot of good questions, I think, for the board, for our staff, and from the public.
I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, this is Cindy Gustafson. Can I weigh in?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. I am really concerned with anything. I mean, RENA is the minimum, it doesn't make forward progress in addressing, at least on North Shore, our extreme needs in workforce housing. And I thought our intent all along on this flexibility was tied to some amount of workforce housing, whether it be at market rate, and I know the circumstances are very different between North and South Shore, how much is affordable and how much is deed restricted to achievable. I can be flexible on, because we have people at all income levels. We hear testimony every single meeting about middle income, middle class people and families that can't put down roots in our community. And RENA doesn't address that, right? Our RENA numbers for a county are done countywide and not on a basis that would ever get us close to addressing the needs that we have at North Shore. So I have a hard time with more flexibility without addressing workforce housing for our community. And I can be flexible about how much is affordable or not, but to look at just pure market rate product, taking advantage of density and housing, I think is a big step for the board. And I would definitely want to see some criteria that address that. Now, I haven't heard your specific project, John, so I don't know. And I defer to my city colleague and El Dorado County Supervisor, but this is a huge step from where we were just trying to get workforce housing and people to trust us that we were going to focus on that in our town centers. So.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, those were my concerns as well. And I've spent the morning talking with John and Alyssa, trying to understand this a little bit, and I still have really big concerns. So my understanding is the city has opted out of our phase 2 housing, so they've come up with their own program, which includes some affordable housing, some inclusionary housing requirements, or in lieu of fees. So these developments would generate some of that, and they believe some of these market rate units would be affordable for locals because the economics of developing in South Lake are different than in the North Shore. But they could also be used as second homes, and we have so few units left to give in this basin that we don't even have enough to accommodate our workforce housing needs, much less that plus our affordable housing needs. So we are giving an incentive here, and I think we need to have more certainty that we're going to be getting a benefit from getting these incentives as well, because in a perfect world, if we could build all our affordable housing and achievable and luxury housing, that would be great, but we can't do that here. And I think the board wants to prioritize workforce housing and affordable housing over market rate housing in these new developments. So I guess, you know, I don't think we should open up this whole thing to the whole lake. You know, we could focus on the city if we feel like they're doing enough that this is actually going to help workers. But it seems like it's way less than what we were trying to accomplish with our recent phase 2 amendments. And so for me, I think if they want to approve something that is not our phase 2 requirements, it provides at least the same results or better. And I'm not feeling that about what the city has proposed here. So maybe we could get a little more clarity on what a development like this at market rate would provide in terms of incentives for workforce housing and or affordable housing, just to understand better what we're getting. Because I thought if they were going to opt out, they had to come up with something basically at least as good as what we did with phase 2 around the lake. So maybe you could explain how that works.
Yeah, I can clarify that and then pass it over to John. Just to clarify, the city is opting into the phase 2 amendments with these area plan amendments. And so the phase 2 amendments for coverage, height, density, and parking specific to deed restricted housing, that is all going into effect with these area plan amendments. So 100% deed restricted developments will have access to those incentives that we passed through this area plan amendment. In addition to those, in addition to opting into those, the city is proposing this increased, only the increased density up to 65 units per acre for market rate. And just to, again, clarify what John mentioned earlier, the city did, I think last year, pass an inclusionary housing ordinance. So any market rate housing that is built, that's over, that the unit size is over 2,000 square feet, they have to pay an in lieu fee that goes directly to housing or affordable housing in the city. So even if market rate units are being built, there is a fee that is being paid that goes towards affordable housing.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. John Hitchcock, may I respond or comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Alyssa's correct. We are opting into the phase 2 amendments and exactly as adopted by TRPA for affordable housing. What we put together is in a package is a package which we believe is a complete package to advance our housing program. In addition to opting into the phase 2 amendments, what we're also proposing is currently today, the maximum density standards in our town centers is up to 25 units an acre. So what we're seeing are developers proposing condos or multifamily projects with 3,000, 4,000 square foot units. What we're proposing as part of our package is actually to adopt a minimum density standard of 12 units per acre up to a maximum 65 units an acre in order to drive what we call affordable by design. So with putting in the factor of putting in a minimum density standard as well as maximum density standard will create smaller units, which by design will be more affordable. So that's one part of the package. The other part of the package is making sure we don't lose any housing that we currently have within our town centers today by not allowing conversion of multifamily units into single family units that then become vacation home rentals. We require developers to either rebuild within the area plan, the number of units lost, or require them to pay an in lieu fee. The city has also adopted inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires any unit in excess of 2,000 square feet to pay an in lieu fee. It's a sliding scale, and that money directly goes into funding our affordable housing program. The developer also has the option to actually also develop units on site or set aside units on site. So with that complete package, we think it's a package that that the city, we believe, will advance our housing goals and strategies in the town center. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess.
This is John Hester. I probably am remiss for not saying this. We at the staff level believe the city's gone above and beyond phase 2. And so that's why we're recommending this. If the committee doesn't feels like they want to just do this for the city of South Lake Tahoe and for density only, that's option 2. And just to make it clear on density, same size building without a density requirement, you can get smaller units, which makes them more affordable. So if you leave height out of the equation and you want to limit it just to South Lake Tahoe, you could go forward with number 2, and that's why we put it up there. Again, what we're trying to send the message is if you meet these standards, we'll consider your amendments in other parts of the basin as well, but we can leave that to later if you want.
Thank you,
Mr.
John.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Shelley Aldine. But I thought the objective of doing these amendments, adopting these amendments, was to avoid piecemealing because it would be applicable based and wide. And so now we're suggesting that we do piecemeal it, make this only applicable to the city of South Lake Tahoe because they've met a lot of our objective with respect to affordable housing. And I don't mind using it as a reward potentially, but I mean, John, the things that you mentioned in your presentation, I mean, it would have been nice to have access to all those things. I just don't have a full picture. That's my problem, and before we make this applicable basin-wide, or before we even make it applicable just to the city of South Lake Tahoe, I'd like to know more about what the city has been able to accomplish and how they have been working to meet their affordable housing objectives and workforce housing objectives. That's why I hate to say it, but I just don't think it's ready for prime time, at least in my mind.
And the dilemma we have is whether you do it basin-wide or just for South Lake Tahoe, the plan amendments that their city council and planning commission have approved are not consistent with the regional plan without making a regional plan amendment or code amendment, sorry, regional code amendment. So that's why we're suggesting one or two. Basically, if you don't move forward with either one, then we have to say to the city when they bring their plan amendments forward, we can find it in conformance, but you have to take this part out. That's really where we are. The reason we brought you recommendation number or alternative number one was because we thought it would be, like you said, a good message to send that if you can meet all these standards, you've done what you're supposed to, because you got to do phase 2 anyway. In fact, Douglas County and Placer County are coming through in the spring. You've got to do those anyway, but if you want to hold off on that, we can. If you want to move forward, we can. Again, we think the city has done what they need to do for that jurisdiction, so we're totally comfortable recommending number 2.
Well, that's fine, John. I mean, our recommendation obviously isn't binding on the board, as Cindy points out, but you know, if we decide to move forward, I would like more information. I think, and the public would like to know what the city of South Lake Tahoe is doing to meet these objectives, you know, and I know that staff is satisfied, which is great. But I think the rest of us need to be persuaded that, you know, what the city of South Lake Tahoe is doing, you know, merits this sort of amendment as a way of, you know, kind of applauding their efforts.
Sure. And I'll propose one suggestion to you. If you want to table this and hear the presentation on the next 2 items and then come back to this, that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
So this is Ben Kika, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. From what I can tell, the proposed amendment from the city of South Lake Tahoe is in conformance with the regional plan, with this sole exception being the housing piece, right?
Being the density.
The density piece, that's what I mean. I don't know why they would have approved a plan that was not in conformance with the regional plan. That's a sort of separate issue. But I think the broader issue over number 2 is just it's really just a small piece of the overall equation as it relates to the residential density. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so as a developer, I look at this and I go, we provided these incentives for 100% achievable, and because no one else could get density and height, the land values are what they are today. They're lower, and it makes it more likely that someone is going to build that 100% achievable project. By increasing the density here, it definitely raises the price of land in the whatever area we do this in, making it less likely that it will be 100% affordable or achievable, because now there are options, and those options sometimes work out better. So, you know, I'm thinking that this probably, you know, even though it's designed to work in a complementary way, unless we looked at, you know, an economic study that showed what each scenario would, you know, create for a land value, we just don't know how this is going to work out. And my guess is it's all going to be market rate. And my fear is the in lieu of fees that cities usually provide are so tiny compared to the actual cost of producing the units that in the end of the day, you know, we'd be lucky if we got 5% affordable out of those subsidies after a development was done. So I we don't know enough to know if we're getting the bang for the buck that we want, and this is helping us with where we need to go, which is have more housing for our workforce and for locals and not second homes. So I don't know, have you done that study? Do you know if every unit was over 2,000 square feet, what percentage would we expect to see that we could build affordably based on those subsidies? I mean, I just don't have any idea what this all means. It doesn't sound good to me.
And Mr. Chair, this is Cindy. I thought Mr. Hester provided an opportunity for us to maybe table this right now, hear from the city on their specifics, and then maybe we'll have a better understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if that information, if they're gonna go into those
Can
kind
you
of,
address that can you address that in the next items? And
Yes. Mhm.
okay, well then, is everyone okay with tabling this and moving on to the next? Do we need to do a vote to do that, or do we need public comment? Or,
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is Graham St. Michelle. I think it's fine to go ahead and table this. I'm thinking it through. It's on the agenda. We're going to take a pause and go to the other agenda items. If we're going to take action on this first item, we just will need to come back and take public comment. But I think it's okay and permissible to say that we will come back to this if we want to hear those other items from the city first.
okay, so it feels like the committee would be fine doing that? Does that
Yeah,
sound-
Mr. Chairman, I move to table this item
Great.
until after consideration of the next two items on the agenda.
Perfect. Do we need a roll call vote, or can we just do a voice vote?
Voice vote's fine.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move on then. Now, my understanding is that we would go to item number 5 before number 4. Does that still, you think that
Correct.
works, given our tabling?
So our new order is 543.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
All right.
Mr.
Oh.
Chair, this is Julie Reagan, Executive Director. You can't see in the room, but those who are in the room are smelling some pizza that has been delivered. So I just wanted to invite the members of the committee that are here to help themselves as we continue the next item, and appreciate the flexibility.
Okay,
Yeah,
did you
Jenny.
want to take a 5-minute, 10-minute break, or should we just keep going?
I'm seeing no shaking of the heads. So let's
Okay.
continue on if that's all right.
Okay, great, great. Better for me because I can neither smell nor taste that pizza that you have there, so I'll have to move on and get my own afterward. All right, so that brings us to agenda item 5, discussion and possible recommendation for approval of the proposed amendments to the City of South Lake Tahoe's Tourist Core Area Plan. The amendments would increase density and establish a minimum density in town centers, clarify use categories, improve residential design standards, clarify commercial floor area, bicycle parking, and vehicle parking requirements for commercial and residential uses. The amendments would increase consistency with recently amended TRPA regulations and state housing regulations. The amendments would increase consistency with recently amended TRPA regulations and state housing regulations. Again, information on this item can be found on page 245 of your packet. So Alyssa, you want to take it again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know all of you are very familiar with area plans at this point, but area plans were a new framework back in 2012 with the regional plan. They allow for our local jurisdictions to implement their unique planning visions for their communities while also implementing our goals and policies of the regional plan. Let's go to the next slide, please. And next slide. So the Tourist Core Area Plan is one of 2 approved area plans for the city of South Lake Tahoe. It incorporates the Heavenly Village area down to Ski Run. And then, down almost, it incorporates also the Bijou area along the lake. The city has been working on these amendments for the last about year and a half. They did come to RPC and did an informational item back in May of 2023 and were recommended for approval by the APC back in August. So with that, I will turn it over to John Hitchcock with the city.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, John Hitchcock, Planning Manager, City South Lake Tahoe. The city thanks the committee for considering the city initiated amendments to the tourist core area plan. Could we get the slideshow up, please? Oh, let's see, slide 2, please.
You know, real quickly, I just made check with Graham. I have property ownership in the tourist core area plan, and I know I need to make sure that I'm able, or do I need to recuse? I know I'm not on this committee necessarily, but I know in this, when this comes up in the city, I have to leave the room, so I just want to make sure.
Thanks, Mayor Bass. I think you're fine to stay in and listen. Yeah, you're not planning to vote because you're not the committee. So, yeah, thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you. So the goal and the intent of the city initiative area plan is implement our housing amendment policies, implement incentives for transportation, and creating further greater connectivity in the tourist core. Also increase consistency with state laws regarding housing and parking. State laws change over time, and our attempt is to make sure our plan is consistent with state law where applicable. Increase consistency with TRPA code changes. As I mentioned earlier, we are proposing to adopt the phase 2 amendments as it pertains to affordable housing projects. Explore ways to activate our streetscapes, and then just general improvements and code corrections. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. We realize certain code sections, or at least design standards we adopted, don't really work as they really intended them to, and are proposing changes to them. But I just want to talk a little bit further about at least our initiative with it relates to housing, because the amendments of this area plan is really focused on trying to create more housing options and all range of housing options. The city's taken an active role in promoting a range of housing choices within our city limits. It's the city's has been partnering with affordable housing projects and developing affordable housing projects on lands that are either owned by the city or surplus state lands owned by the state. For example, Sugar Pine Village 248 unit affordable housing project down by the Y, which is currently under construction. 3 of the units are currently in the process of being occupied, which counts for about 70 affordable housing units. The city is also adopting inclusionary housing ordinance that requires either an in lieu payment or the construction of new units for the projects that results in market rate single family units greater than 2,000 square feet. The city did do an economic analysis on this, and based on our analysis, the replacement housing ranges anywhere from 5% to 17% if the developer chooses to construct the units on site. The in lieu fee is also tied into that percentage. So the way our fee is structured, the larger the unit, the higher the in lieu fee, which is intended to be able to fund the construction of units consistent with those percentages that are required for actual replacement of units. As I mentioned earlier, the city's all taken innovative approaches to encouraging housing options by offering free development rights. The city has amassed a number of tourist accommodation units over the years. What we have been doing is we've been converting them into residential units of use, and we offer them for free for individuals who are interested in developing accessory dwelling units or developing for rent rental units, multifamily. We don't give them away for free if they're going to be used for single family market rate units. We also require that they're deed restricted from being used for short-term rentals. For this year alone, we've approved 19 ADUs and 24 multifamily for rent units. It's a city desire to amend the TCAP to further create additional incentives to create more opportunities to develop higher density options, including market rate, In our town center, within close proximity to our employment base, our transportation services, our evacuation routes, and recreation opportunities. The proposed changes in whole are intended to preserve existing housing stock, promote affordable, moderate, achievable market rate units, and also to incentivize smaller units and promote redevelopment of our aging commercial centers. Next slide, please. Our first proposal is a change to our density standards. Today, our density standard is maximum of 25 units an acre. That allows a developer to develop anywhere from 1 unit to 2 units to 3 units an acre, all the way up to 25. We're proposing to amend our density standards to require a minimum of 12 units per acre for multifamily and condominium conversion projects, and then also to allow a density up to 65. The intent is basically to drive smaller units, smaller by design, which increases affordability. We do have some exceptions applying to existing multifamily properties and qualifying mixed-use projects that may be interested in adding a few additional units to existing properties. They would be exempt from the minimum density standards. As we mentioned, we are opting into phase 2 amendments, so there's no maximum density for 100% deed restricted units, which are classified as affordable, moderate, and achievable. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, we noticed a trend when Measure T was adopted of conversions of multifamily units into single-family units in our town centers, and then those being converted into vacation home rentals. We're proposing a standard, no net loss standards. Multifamily dwellings are replaced by single-family dwellings should be prohibited from receiving vacation home rental permits. Units not built on site should be rebuilt elsewhere in the plan area and be equivalent in size and number of units. Next slide, please. We're proposing changes to our parking standards as relates for commercial parking to allow reduction in optional reduction in parking of 25% when they were in 1/2 mile with transit stop. This somewhat mimics the standards that have been established by state law. You could get further reductions for these commercial properties by submitting parking demand analysis or providing additional mitigation measures such as employee bus passes or increasing number of bicycle parking opportunities on site. We're also proposing allowing additional parking lot for uses which have unique demands of seasonality, which require specific findings. We're also proposing changes to multifamily parking to only require 1 parking per allowed unit. Also, beyond that, you're allowed to reduce an additional 20% if the property owners takes responsibility for parking management by actually recording a deed restriction that makes them responsible for parking management and laying out what those parking management strategies will be. And the phase 2 amendments, no minimum parking standards for 100% deed restricted units. We're also taking a different approach when it comes to bicycle parking. Our previous standard tied bicycle parking to the number of automobile parkings. To us, that didn't seem to make sense. We decided to base the number of bicycle parkings rather on the intensity of use. So if commercial use has a high intensity of use, then we're going to require more bicycle parking. Uses that have less intensity would require less bicycle parking. Next slide, please. In an attempt to activate our streetscapes, we're proposing an exemption for commercial floor area. It is intended to activate our town centers and our streetscape by encouraging outdoor dining in our town center. This is modeled after an existing TRPA code of ordinance section. It would allow existing commercial uses to increase the number of outdoor seating, no more than 300 square feet, up to 20 seats, whichever is less, without requiring an allocation of commercial floor area. And then there's also additional specific findings that are needed to be made. Next slide, please. We're proposing changes to our residential open space requirements. This issue actually came up during our planning commission meeting where they were concerned that with increase in density, the requirements for open space may actually impact the number of units we can have on site. So we're creating an assumption that if an open space requirements, right now, it's, I believe it's 100 square foot per unit. If that impacts the number of dwelling units and results in reduction of dwelling units, that we would allow exception to reduce the number of square footage of residential open space. Next signage, please. We're proposing a change to signage for accessory uses. Currently, accessory uses, with exception of those in the casino core, are not allowed to advertise. We're proposing that accessory uses should be given the opportunity to advertise. However, they would still be subject to the existing city sign formula, and thus it wouldn't be an increase in the number of signs. An applicant would have to decide how they would want to portion their sign allocation to the various type of uses that they have on the property. Next slide, please. We're proposing a boundary change to the tourist core area plan to incorporate 2 existing tourist accommodation uses that are adjacent to the existing boundary of the tourist core. Currently, these 2 properties are legal non-conforming uses in a residential zone. Proposing to incorporate them into the tourist core area plan in order to give them opportunities to redevelop their aging tourist accommodation uses, and located right on intersection of Pioneer Trail and US Highway 50 in what is considered the Pioneer Triangle. And with that, I believe my next slide concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Great, thank you. Any questions from committee members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of clarifications. So the outdoor seating restriction obviously was implemented during COVID. Does the TRPA explicitly, I mean, is this language consistent with the TRPA's restrictive language? The 20 seats or 300 square feet, or is this in a modification? Because one of the comments that Lou Feldman made before he left was, you know, it's temporary coverage. I mean, he doesn't understand why there would be any limitation, to be honest with you, on outdoor seating. So I'm just wondering if the TRPA doesn't restrict it, if you want to reconsider limiting it to 20 seats or 300 square feet.
I'll defer to Alyssa, but it's modeled on existing ordinance that's on the books today.
A TRPA?
Correct.
TRPA restriction.
Correct. Yeah, we have an existing code section that states that legally existing additions to or expansions of legally existing commercial floor area of 500 square feet or 5% of the existing commercial floor area can be is exempt from requiring additional commercial floor area, as long as it meets those standards that were on the slide that the city had, and that is consistent with their area plan language.
Can expand on.
Can you go back to that slide just so I can look at it while you're answering?
Slide number 5-6. I can expand on that a little bit too, how we arrived at the 300 square feet and 20 seats. In discussions with the South Tahoe Public Utility District, they essentially allow an expansion of 20 seats, which equates to about 300 square feet without requiring an additional urinal. And so in order to keep without making it too onerous, that's how we arrived at those numbers.
So let's say you have a restaurant and they have movable seating inside their restaurant, and they want to move those tables and chairs out and use them during a beautiful day at Lake Tahoe. Is that permissible? I mean, could you have more than 20 seats if you're not adding to total seating, but you're just relocating that seating to an outside patio area?
That's a good question. I mean, if you're relocating the seats out to an outdoor, then you're not creating additional capacity. What the city's asking for is to allow us to have additional capacity, but within certain limits. So this would be an addition. For example, we had a commercial use that had, let's say, 20 seats indoor, and they wanted to do additional 20 seats outdoor. This standard would allow them to do it without getting an allocation of CFA, provided that it's legally existing and it meets all these findings that are listed on this slide.
But if they wanted to just move existing, I'm sorry, this is Cindy Gustafson. If they wanted to move existing seating outside, there'd be no limitation from this.
I would refer to TRPA staff on that one, but I don't believe so.
I think we ran into a coverage issue and we had brought something, this is going back, maybe somebody else like Julie might remember, this is going back 6 or 8 years. And we got to this point with it, and former board member Jim Lawrence was worried about how he would track it, so we didn't go any further with it. But
Well, But
Right.
John, you can move the tables onto existing coverage. I mean, it's not necessarily creating new coverage.
Yeah,
no, if they didn't have coverage,
I see. If they just put picnic tables outside and you grab food to go, I mean, during COVID, we saw that all over the
Yep.
place, right?
that's
And
what we were proposing
We
to
didn't-
extend.
We didn't go scouting for coverage on picnic tables, as far as I know.
Right, and we will probably bring that back to you at some point to change
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
to allow this permanently. Because we think it's a good idea to
Yeah,
activate the streets.
great idea to activate our streets and create more vibrancy downtown, and we need flexibility on that, as, you know, as long as it's not impeding other activities, so.
Or obstructing.
Yeah, or
pedestrian,
obstructing
yeah,
pedestrian activities.
activities. And one other question, John, on, well, I don't have to give a page number, but it's, to reduce the residential open space requirement for high density projects. Why would you want to eliminate, especially if you have a unit that's occupied by kids? I mean, this is a quality of life issue. I mean, yeah, you can go to the beach, but you have to get in your car, you have to walk. I mean, and open space, I think is critical to the health and well-being of people occupying these otherwise very dense developments. I just don't understand the theory behind this.
Yeah, I think the concern there was from our planning commission members, potentially resulting in a reduction of units. The concern was, you know, our efforts here are trying to get more units on the ground and there's the potential that residential open space may impact the number of units we have on the ground. We agree with you that having an open space is critical to any high density project, and we're definitely open to suggestions on this rather than maybe limiting to 10%. Maybe we can allow flexibility that would be up to staff planners to negotiate with the developers on what that open space requirement can be. But we're open to suggestions. Right now, the requirement is 100 square foot per unit.
I can provide a little more context on that as well. Anna Kashuba, Senior Planner for the City of South Lake Tahoe. Just some more context, background on how we arrived at that limitation. As John mentioned, it did come from a planning commission comment. The previous, and it was tied to the increase in density, the previous maximum density of 25 units per acre. That was never an issue for developers to meet the open space standards for developments of that size. So I don't see this exception ever being used unless a development does use density beyond that previous maximum. And along with that change, we also did change the requirement. Previously, it was optional for developers to have private open space, which would be a private balcony per unit, or to have like community open space, which would be kind of a playground area, barbecue patio area for the that serves the entire development. And now developers, of course, still have the option to include balconies and private open space, but they are required to make any open space available to all units.
Well, I just think it's, in hindsight, you're gonna probably kick yourself. If somebody comes in and uses the maximum allowable density and they have very little open space, first of all, I think it's going to affect the marketability of those units, especially if they're market rate. So I suppose it's a judgment call on their part, but I do think that incorporating a modest amount of open space into every development is critical. And how do you handle snow storage? I mean, I look around at some of the areas at Tahoe and I wonder how they're accommodating without actually, you know, transporting it off-site, how they're dealing with snow storage during a major snowstorm.
That's the $1 million question. We We work closely with developers to provide adequate snow storage on site. We have in the past, for projects where there is not adequate snow storage, we require the applicants to enter in a deed restriction requiring them to essentially enter a contract with a hauling service to take snow off site.
Yeah, I'm afraid, and I'm not suggesting that all developers are strictly interested in maximizing their profits, but there's a big incentive to do that. And so eliminating open space, not having sufficient room for snow storage that's low hanging fruit for them. And so I really think that, it would behoove the city long-term to insist that those needs be addressed even if it requires a reduction in the density of the development. I think, you want to be proud of the end result, and it needs to be an asset to the community and not, something that's, has no functionality. So anyway, that's my comment.
Any other committee member comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Cindy. I had one. On the parking requirements, we've heard a lot about this on the North Shore. Obviously concerned that by reducing parking and yet living in a region, especially at North Shore, where parking is still, having automobiles is still a need, that we're pushing parking onto adjacent properties. Have you experienced that at South Shore? And do you have parking management plans and enforcement plans to help? Because what we've seen is people get a reduction, but for instance, our workforce housing project in Kings Beach quite often has parking out on the street front and impacts other neighbors.
Yes, we do run into that. What our experience is if the way that we're proposing the standards is there's a minimum parking requirement. Actually, it's not a minimum. What we're calling is a maximum. You have to have so many parking. And then from there, it's up to the developer to decide if they want to reduce the number of parking. If they want to reduce the number of parking, then they have to meet our performance metrics to show that they can adequately park the number of units or tenants that they have on site. And as part of that, the city does have the discretion, to require them to enter into parking agreements for each one of these properties. It's kind of from a planning perspective for us anyways, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. We need more transit we need better, more efficient transit in order to support higher density and reduce parking. But then you also need that infrastructure of higher density in place in order to support the transit. And so we're attempting to do both things at the same time. If that makes sense.
Well, absolutely. And I would just encourage you to look at, requiring contributions to the transit system then, if you're going to take the reduction in parking and do other things so that you can provide both at the same time. So, and make sure you have teeth, because what neighbors feel is they're bearing the price for somebody getting to move forward with more intense use without adequate parking. So I know that's where we're trying to get, and I know it's a good incentive, but we've got to have teeth in these things. Otherwise, the rest of us are continuing to try to raise funds to provide transit.
Any other questions from committee members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. John, under that same series of provisions, number 6, modify the build to line standards. I'm assuming that would be zero setback? Build to line? Okay. Standards so that a modification may be waived when a single finding is made. Could you explain that?
The concern with the build to line, in some cases, potential impacts on scenic resources and ridgeline views. And so we wanted to create a little more flexibility, particularly when we have parcels that are site constrained. And and not possible to have them build right at the build-to line. That would give them some flexibility to move the structure back in order to accommodate a new building or to protect scenic resources and create opportunities to implement additional community design characters to reduce overall massing and building size.
So with a zero lot line provision, I mean, how does that, is that restricted to areas that already have, increased density? I mean, you're not gonna, I mean, there are a lot of, friction zones that are inadvertently created when you have, for example, a building that has a zero light line next to a single family home that was required to have a 15-foot setback. I mean, how have you controlled that?
So we actually dealt with this when we originally adopted the Tourist Corridor Plan as well as the Tahoe Valley Area Plan. We actually have the stair step requirements for the solar access. Projects that are built adjacent to residential districts automatically are required to have a 10-foot setback. And then on top of that, they're required to be set back at a 45-degree angle so they don't have an impact on the adjacent residential neighborhood. Back when we adopted the tourist core, I can't remember when at this point, this issue actually came up and we actually did the analysis and concluded that with that stair stepping effect, that there would be no impact on adjacent residential neighborhoods.
Thank you,
Any-
Mr. Chairman. That's all.
Any other questions from committee members? I do have a couple I want to ask. You said that you estimate between 5 and 70% from the inclusionary requirement. Is that affordable or achievable units?
Mr. Chair, for the city, they're affordable units.
Okay, so they are income restricted, not just.
Yes,
Are
they
achievable.
must be, the ordinance itself says inclusionary housing units must be deed restricted for purchase or rent by low or lower income households.
Okay, and then so I'm still also confused how all this works with our condo conversion provisions that we have where we require 10% be set aside. Would that be on top instead of, how does that work?
Yeah, I can take that. The inclusionary requirement that the 10% that you're referring to that we approved a while back would not apply within the city because the city has their own inclusionary requirement.
Okay, so we're thinking that if all the units were larger than 2,000 square feet, we might get 5 to 17% deed restricted affordable units. I mean, five is low, 17 would be great, but my guess as a greedy developer, and Shelley, we take every opportunity to maximize profit because profit is much more rare in the development world than you imagine, than most people imagine it is. So, I would just build all 1,999 square foot places and I know I could get 4 or 5 bedroom units in that size. So I'm still just really concerned that we're not getting a lot for this change, a lot of advantage on this. Do you know at 65 dwelling units per acre, with the required setbacks and coverage and all those, and height limits, what is the average size of a unit that you would end up with?
We haven't, Mr. Chairman, this is John Hitchcock. We haven't done the analysis, but the most recent project that came in at close to 25 units an acre, in order to minimize the cost of the inclusionary housing ordinance, they proposed housing units that were 1,200 to, I believe, about 1,800 square feet.
At 25 an acre.
Yeah, at 20, that one was close to 25 an acre.
Okay. So at 65, they would have to be small units. Then.
You would have to you have to take into account obviously the coverage and as well as height, but we believe that with the minimum and the maximums and the land coverage restrictions here in the basin will automatically drive smaller units rather than large units, which is what we're currently seeing being built on the ground today.
Yeah. I mean, I just know you have to get as much square footage as you can on a property to make it pay. Otherwise, someone will outbid you and do that. So, you know, these will be maxed out. Every square foot that's possible will be built, probably. So, okay. Dang. I guess I'm just not, I just don't know where this is what this is gonna end up giving us, in the end. I'm still really dubious of what we're gonna get from this. At the end of the day, because I don't feel like we have enough information, and maybe it hasn't all been modeled. So, that's my issue. I do want to say, by the way, though, I'm critical because I know how developers think as a developer, and how good we are at getting around really expensive rules that cities and counties put in place. But I think you guys are doing great work, and what you're doing is the right stuff. I think that's all really good. I'm just still a little scared of what we're going to end up with. But so I don't think I would be willing personally to do this outside the city where other people haven't put in the thought. And I guess if we aren't liking what we see, we can always change it at some.
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest that we hear public comment?
Yeah, that would be great.
We're kind of morphing into a little bit of stating positions versus asking
Okay.
questions.
Okay, so now we would go to public comment on just this one item, and then we'll go on to the next item, and then we'll move back to item number 3, right? That's our order.
Mr. Chair, this is Graham St. Michelle. Could we pull up the motion just to have that in front of us of what that would look like so we could make a little clarification? I think might be worthwhile to do just because we kind of put off the other first agenda item. Do you mind?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so I just for clarification, as you read the first motion, you know, it references, okay, approval, motion to recommend governing board approval of, and it's the proposed tourist core area plan amendments. And then the last part I just want to note for the public and for everybody, provided the governing board can make the necessary amendments to chapter 13 to allow high density in centers. And that was that first item. I just want to make sure everyone understands that. That was the first item we came back to. I think we can take comment on this because, you know, the motion does say provided the governing board can make that chapter 13, so we can come back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're just I mean, we will vote, but we don't have the authority to approve it ourselves. So, yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's go to.
Question.
Oh, sure.
Question, Mr. Chairman, Shelley Aldine. So since the stated purpose of this particular area plan amendment is to facilitate the development of workforce housing, can we make it exclusively for workforce housing? That these amendments to density and height will only be used in connection with bona fide workforce housing projects? I mean, that's the stated intent. So, I mean, at some future date, when you've reached and maybe the thing to do is to link it to X number of units. When you've developed sufficient units, to meet the requirements of the city of South Lake Tahoe, then these exceptions can apply to other forms of housing. But I think there's a general concern that we just don't want this to be used as second homes or, market rate housing for people who want a vacation at Lake Tahoe.
Oops. The record, John Hitchcock. The city doesn't have a definition of workforce housing. But also, I understand the concern with units becoming potential second homes. But I mean, when the city looks at it, in reality, when it comes to actually aggregating all the development rights associated and trying to do some of these projects, if a developer wanted to do market rate units and came to the city to use our development rights, they would be basically tied to doing for rent units only. And so it's unlikely those will become second homes. If they want to do true market rates, they would be required to go out and aggregate those development rights on their own on open market, which I believe is very difficult to do. I don't think there's that many development rights out there to be had. And in most cases, developers will have to work with local jurisdictions and to get development rights associated that are owned by local jurisdictions. In the situation with the city, we have, restrictions in place to make sure that those don't become second units, if that's helpful.
Mr. Chair, if I can also respond to Ms. Aldean's question. This goes to the previous item. You could very well add a criterion like that to the previous item.
Okay,
If you
great.
want this, yeah, so if you want to propose an area plan that has more density or height, you have to restrict it, as you mentioned. That's an option.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also just like to point out that we do have the phase 2 amendments that were specific to height and density for deed restricted. So we already do have, and the city is again implementing those in their area plan. So if they were to restrict the 65 units per acre density provision to only deed restricted, that's actually more limiting than what they're proposing with they already have no maximum density for deed restricted in their area plan amendment.
Yeah, that's the issue is that we can't get what we want without it conflicting with what we already got with our phase 2 requirements. If we put a deed restriction that it's achievable, so that it has to be full-time, then what we're doing is we're doing a second version of phase 2 that is less desirable. So I mean, I like that the inclusionary housing here is actually affordable. So because that's a tier of housing affordability that we haven't found any way to incentivize yet. I really think 2,000 square feet is too big because, as you mentioned, the developer proposed 1,200 to 1,800 square foot units. So none of those were paying anything into your inclusionary housing fund. And at 65 dwelling units to the acre, if they maximize the square footage, which they'll have to make it profitable, all the units would be less than 2,000. So we would be getting all market rate units, I think, at that point. Now they would be smaller, and so maybe they would be affordable by design, but some of them at least would end up being second homes. I just don't know have any idea what percentage that would be. So how we're actually helping locals versus,
Yes.
yeah, I'm sorry, I
Chairman?
don't know how to
No.
evaluate this.
That's okay. I'm wondering if the better approach is to have the local jurisdictions, I'm sure they've already done this work, they've already done this calculation, determine how many, low-income housing units are needed, how many moderate income units are needed, how many workforce housing units are needed that are in the achievable range. And once you've satisfied, low and moderate, then it can be applied to, and workforce, it can be applied to other uses. In other words, so you have, these amendments would only apply to affordable housing and achievable housing, until you've reached the maximum required to satisfy your needs.
So obviously the housing needs far outstrip what the state requires us in terms of the RENA numbers. For affordable housing, the city has met our RENA numbers for this housing cycle. Where I'm not gonna say we're falling behind, where we haven't met our targets yet are the market rate units. I did an analysis of,
I'm sorry, John, are you equating market rate with workforce? So these are people who may, earn far in excess of 120% of median income, but they work in the basin.
well, we don't have a definition for workforce housing. That's not a term that we use for us. It's either affordable housing by definition or it's market rate.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but I mean, you can create a definition. I mean, does TRPA have a definition of workforce housing? And if so, what is it?
We don't have a specific definition for workforce. We have a definition for achievable housing, which is essentially workforce housing.
Which has no income cap.
Which is, it does not have an income cap. It's
But it requires that they work in the basin a certain number of hours every,
correct.
local employer. I mean, to me, that's quantifiable. In other words, and I think it might allay some concerns that, we just adopted the phase 2 housing amendments, and now we're going to extend, the use of these incentives to something other than affordable housing. I don't know, to me, it would make sense to kind of tier it. And once those lower income levels, housing for those lower income level residents have been met, and then you can apply these higher densities and higher height restrictions to the next category. I don't know, I just throw that out for consideration.
Mr. Chairman, John Hester again suggests we go to public comments and then we have some more of these deliberative discussions.
Is it on?
Mr. Henigman, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was, all right, we'll now go to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Regional Planning Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand either now in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So are there any members in the room?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great.
This is mute.
It's on. It is on, yes.
Okay. My name is Deepak Sharma. I'm a developer and lodging business operator in Tahoe tourism industry. I live and work in the trenches, and I think it's my duty to express my views from the trenches. I think over here, we've been talking in the clouds for a good part of time. So why do you have to build new affordable housing when you have plenty of old homes that are available in residential areas, and these old homes cost less than the new built units? As a bureaucracy here, you can do something. Just stop losing the homes in residential areas to short-term rentals. South Lake Tahoe is in process of capturing a lot of old homes for local housing just from Measure T. Interestingly, that is unique to South Lake Tahoe. And that measure came out of ballot box, not from bureaucracy. That's, something to be said. Thousands of homes are coming to become available for locals in South Lake Tahoe, and a good number of them are affordable and achievable. There are plenty of old, small cabins in South Lake Tahoe that fit the bill there. You have plenty of opportunity to capture old homes in the rest of the basins for local housing if you only act. New housing is a prime example of Sugar Pine. It costs close to $1 million to build a studio or one-bedroom apartment. The closest thing that comes to similar unit is a luxury unit in Trump Tower. Sugar Pine is a city and state project. It can never be done by a private developer on a private land. Please stop making an example out of that for private developers. The TCAP and TVAP are commercial and mostly tourist areas. Almost all the parcels in that area already have hotels there, or the remaining ones allow hotels to be built. So nobody is taking housing out of nowhere in this amendment. These are already commercial and tourist areas. By most means, South Lake Tahoe is anyway the most affordable area in the basin. It is sometimes more affordable than Sacramento. The problem here is not affordable homes. The problem here, the big elephant in the room, is not enough year-round jobs. In this room, we are lucky that we are spending whole day here and our bills are getting paid. This is early November, we are in the slow season. Most of the people in the tourism industry are out of job or are underemployed. And that stays true for 5 months of a year. Please do something about that. The housing here is pretty similar to Sacramento. Unless you are on the beach, a lot of old cabins in South Lake Tahoe cost half the price of a new Sugar Pine unit. You decide which one of the two is affordable. The areas under discussion are commercial and tourist zones. Again, there are either already hotels there or the remaining parcels allow hotels to be built. Without the new provisions that are being put together here, there is no housing coming in this area. This just simply doesn't pencil. And you cannot force private developer to do something where they're going to lose money. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Anyone else in the room?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then let's go to online comments. Anyone online?
Mr. Chair, we have 6 hands raised online. The first hand up is Ellie Waller. Ellie, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you. Ellie Waller, phase 1 nor phase 2 housing amendments ever defined these terms. We started years ago with low. Now we have moderate, affordable, achievable to add to the confusion. And until such time that a codified definition by the state or states or TRPA comes forward, how are you ever going to figure out what we're doing here? I participated for 20 years. A bunch of people that are going to talk to you today have participated even longer or have worked for TRPA or worked in the industry. I'm not sure how we can continue to piecemeal any of these codes being proposed in item 3. I'm looking forward to coming back to that. But again, you can tell I'm speechless and do not believe that you should go forward with anything today. It all needs to be tabled. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Anyone else or next?
Next hand is Ann Nichols. Ann, please unmute to make your comment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I wrote an article in Moonshine Inc. for last month about, Karen Fink came out with this article about, what we're doing in TRPA for workforce housing. Well, what is it? Let's get a definition, because they're people think of workforce housing, the national definition is affordable, or low income. So you're obfuscating what it's really about. So let's please get real and do that. And then when you talk about, oh, we're going to just do scenic according to findings 1, 3, and 9. Oh, it's okay. The other ones still count. Well, then why don't you enumerate them? 1, 3, and 9 is, is it above the tree canopy? Well, some of our trees are 150 feet tall. And then does it obfuscate or obstruct the view of the ridge line from 300 feet? Well, if you're in Crystal Bay and you're 300 feet away from Waldorf Astoria, it does block the ridge line. So that, I really feel like we're being fooled on this. And, the whole workforce housing affordable thing, people have been feeling like housing 2 it was just a red herring to do more market rate. And I know you didn't mean to do that, but that's what's happening. And as a realtor for 50 years, like Vince says, you want to figure out what's the way to make the most money. And if I was a developer, I'd go like, oh, I don't need to do 65 units per acre. I'll do 40 and I'll make them bigger. And look, it's less. It'll be less impact. I'll just go higher. Anyway, you guys, you have to just this is piecemeal planning. It's for South Lake Tahoe. You don't need to do this. Treat them separately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next.
Next hand up is Doug Flaherty. Doug, please unmute to make your comment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Doug Flaherty, TahoeCleanAir.org. I just have to say, these comments, this back and forth agenda item changes, trying to amend these recommendations or whatever on the fly. There's no substantial evidence to justify any of it. There's no data on the part of South Lake Tahoe to indicate anything about affordable, achievable. And it's just premature, as Shelley said. This part, all of these are not ready for prime time. So I just urge you, put this off. What's the hurry? Go back, make South Lake Tahoe provide data. Second of all, point of process on public information on your packet. If you go to page 280, which says initial environmental checklist for this item, and you click on it, there is no link. So if the public is relying on the public packet to make a decision and follow this information, there is no link to the environmental checklist. While there could be an argument made that there is a link to the environmental checklist at the bottom of the page, the public should not have to go to 2 places to try to figure out where the environmental checklist is. Second of all, I challenge the environmental checklist information. It took me 15 minutes to find it, but number 76, 77, and 79, there's no substantial evidence whatsoever that on the part of TRPA and CEQA, the checklist, there's no substantial evidence provided that this would not impair implementation or physically interfere with an adopted emergency evacuation plan. There's no substantial evidence to indicate that there'd be less significant exposure to people or structures or significant loss of life or injury or death within areas of a wildfire urban interface zone. So once again, this is subjective. I know you don't like our independent Lake Tahoe evacuation analysis, but I have to say this, you guys don't have any analysis, and in court, that is substantial evidence that can at least lead to a conclusion that there's been a data foundation that has expressed a very good possibility that the evacuation times are between 8 and 11 hours. So you guys need to go back to the drawing board on this, or, I really foresee some legal action here, especially in the light of some of the California decisions at the appellate level. So please table this today. It's just not ready for prime time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Next.
Next hand up is Nick Spiel. Nick, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, my name is Nick Spiel, and I'm a resident of South Lake Tahoe. I'd like to ask the committee to recommend approval of the proposed area plans in these limited areas within city limits. These plans have been approved unanimously by the Planning Commission in the city of South Lake Tahoe and unanimously by the City Council of South Lake Tahoe. These area plans have local support. I would like to ask that representatives from neighboring jurisdictions please ratify this local support and avoid getting too into the weeds of the details of the development standards developed by our local community, only applicable near the Y intersection in South Lake Tahoe and in the tourist core of South Lake Tahoe. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Next up.
There's two more hands up. The next hand is Sophia Heydrich. Sophia, please unmute to make your comment.
Good afternoon, Chair and Regional Planning Committee. My name is Sophia Heydrich. I'm the Advocacy Director for Mountain Area Preservation. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the proposed amendments. I had planned to comment on agenda item 3, but since this is all sort of interrelated, I thought I would highlight a couple of key points now. Several of you touched on this, and I particularly appreciated Ms. Aldine's questions and comments earlier. You are all familiar with the Phase 2 housing amendments that were approved less than a year ago. One of the main goals of the Phase 2 amendments was to incentivize deed-restricted housing for local workers by providing, among other things, more height and density in town centers. Now you are considering amendments which codify a process for local jurisdictions to exceed TRPA's height and density standards in town centers for non-deed restricted housing. This significantly weakens those Phase 2 incentives. Why would a developer deed restrict their housing project for locals if they can already get the height and density they want without doing so? With the help of the proposed TRPA Regional Plan and Code of Ordinance amendments, the City of South Lake Tahoe is proposing density for market rate housing at 65 units per acre. The Phase 2 incentives can already be used for market rate housing with no income cap. It just has to be for locals. The difference between what the city is proposing and the Phase 2 density incentives is just that developers could get over twice as much density and the housing wouldn't have to be for our local community. It could be for second homeowners. Tell me how that helps to solve the housing crisis. Ms. Bettinger said earlier that the current process allows for spot zoning by having different standards in specific sites or locations, and the best solution I can come up with for that issue is just to maintain the TRPA standards rather than making exceptions. And I also wanted to pose a question for staff. The staff report states that since the regional plan was adopted in 2012, local jurisdictions have been able to propose height and density standards that exceed TRPA standards. So agenda item 3 is essentially codifying an existing process, yet that process has never been done before until now. No local jurisdictions have ever proposed heights or densities above the TRPAs for their area plans until now. Where in the regional plan does it allow local jurisdictions to exceed TRPA's height and density standards? I looked through the regional plan and I didn't see any language to that effect. I did see some language that outlines instances where height exceptions could be made. CD-2.1.c.I states that additional height requirements may be provided for unique situations, such as lighting towers, ski towers, buildings within ski area master plans, steep sites, and essential public safety facilities. It does not say TRPA height standards could be exceeded for entire centers within area plans. So how are the proposals today furthering this policy or even consistent with this policy? Is there another part of the regional plan that allows for these changes? And if staff could clarify that would be very helpful. Ultimately, TRPA should uphold its height and density standards and deny the city's request for additional density for several important reasons. One, the TRPA standards were purposefully put in place to minimize environmental impacts and analyzed underneath that. And two, allowing for additional height and density for non-deed restricted housing. It waters down the incentives that are on the table to get developers to build the housing that Tahoe actually needs, which is housing for the local workforce. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sophia. Next up.
The last hand raised is Steve Teixeira. Steve, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Steve Teixeira on behalf of the Lake Tahoe South Shore Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate some of the committee's questions and understand that you have had limited exposure to the proposals that have been placed before you today. We do want to heartily commend the City of South Lake Tahoe for its extensive work to develop these proposals, both in terms of the Tourist Core Area Plan and the Tahoe Valley Area Plan, leading to the proposal for the Chapter 13 amendments that were also placed before you today. The city has been working on these, I think, as Mr. Hitchcock said, and we know because we followed it along for over a year and a half, and a great deal of thought has come into these. I think it's also instructive that a prior commenter noted the Planning Commission of the city unanimously approved these amendments to the Tourist Core Area Plan and Tahoe Valley Area Plan, and that the City Council did as well. So, I hope that if the committee and staff has some questions or concerns, or you need some additional information, that you don't send the city away without some opportunity to have additional information provided and some clarity provided. A tremendous amount of work has gone into these proposals. And I think it's sort of short shrift in some way that they're getting today in terms of the consideration. If you want more data, if you want more specifics, I think that's legitimate. That's part of your purview as a member of the Regional Plan Committee of TRPA. But I want to make sure that you know that we see the city as having done great due diligence to come up with some proposals. And yes, they may be specific to the city, and maybe they should be confined to the city. But that being said, the principle that we supported as the chamber, a fundamental principle of the regional plan of 2012, was that local governments would have more ability to do what they believe is important within their jurisdiction, as long as it's consistent with the regional plan and the goals and policies of the regional plan. I believe that this meets that test. There may be some details that need to be ironed out, but please don't send them away packing without any opportunity to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other hands?
Mr. Chair, there are no more hands raised to comment.
Okay, then we'll close public comment. Any further comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair, this is John Hester. I'd like to make a suggestion that we continue this for a month and we spend the rest of our time getting clear on what questions and information this committee would like us to bring back next month so that we can move these forward with everyone more informed.
Great.
Mr.
Sounds
Chair,
like
Julie.
some confusion.
Oh.
That sounds like a good plan. Sorry, Julie, what was?
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to echo what John Hester suggested, Mr. Chair, Julie Reagan here, and just to thank the city and then to underscore the length of time the community has worked on this. It has just been a significant amount of time since we vetted this at this committee, and I think the discussion's been very productive, very helpful, and we can tease out some specific pieces of data that we need and bring it back to you, and we won't linger on that task.
Okay, great. Does that sound like an approach that the committee would like to go with? Do we vote on that, tabling it, or do we just?
Maybe just check in with the city as well. If the representative from the city might just want to give some feedback, would that be appropriate, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Reagan, yes, the city supports the continuance so that we can go back and provide any additional information that the committee may need, as well as answer any outstanding questions. I'd like to reiterate that, yes, the city, our efforts here is really to promote more housing in the tourist core, and we'd like to be granted that continuance and come back next month with a more robust discussion. Thank you.
Okay, great. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Before we move on, John, among the questions that were asked, the gentleman who testified twice this afternoon, who's the motel owner, somebody who's made an investment in the community, about the effect of Measure T on available housing stock. If you could provide us with some data, how many of those homes are now for sale and at what price? I don't want to create too much more work for you, but he raises an interesting point about, what we don't want houses boarded up. We don't want houses unoccupied. And if in fact the passage of Measure T has diminished the price of those homes, now that they can no longer be used as short-term rentals, it would be interesting to know how many of those properties are available in a specific price range.
Good. We'll add that to the list.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, there's some good studies out there that show if you ban STRs, you get about a 4% reduction in the housing price and the rent. So it really doesn't end up being super impactful, but I'd love to see if you have any local data. They didn't last time I checked, but I think it would also be worthwhile to have the staff respond to any issues. We had a couple people, Ellie and Ann, question whether we had defined the terms, and I think we have defined the terms for our different housing levels. So I don't know if you can point them to that. And if there's anything else that the public brought up that you'd like to respond to, I think we should do that now too.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can respond to that. We do have definitions for both of, or for affordable, moderate, and achievable housing in Chapter 90 of our code. Achievable housing is considered deed restricted housing that's occupied by households who make 80% of the area median income or less. Moderate is 100 or between 80% and 120% of the area median income. And then achievable is, again, what I mentioned before. It does not have an income cap, but at least one member of the household has to work for an employer within the basin or the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District at least 30 hours per week.
Yeah, and the term workforce housing has been thrown around a lot, but that doesn't mean anything to us legally in the basin right now. We have no definition or policy around that, right?
Correct. We do use workforce housing, sort of interchangeably with achievable. And I think we can certainly take, these comments as a suggestion to, use more specific terminology in the future.
Well,
Yeah,
if I could weigh in, Vince, I appreciate that, but I think at least from my understanding, the way, and this is Cindy Gustafson, sorry for the record, the way we've used workforce housing is to include all. So it can be low income, very low income, affordable, moderate or achievable. So that, again, we're focused on trying to, that whole gamut needs an umbrella of deed restricted definition. So maybe it's the reverse, maybe, versus eliminating workforce housing, making sure it's clear to everybody. It's the whole gamut of those categories in the way we've been using it at North Shore.
Okay, that's great. I think if we're going to continue to use that, then we just need to define it. And that's a great definition because it keeps us from having to restipulate what it means every time. So, okay.
And Mr. Chair, just Mr. Chair, Julie Reagan here. Just to build on that, I think there's been a lot of discussion in policy circles around the terminology. And I just wanted to be really clear, when we say things like workforce, we're using that as a general term, not a legal definition, because that also implies that people who are in the low income or, impoverished situations, that they're not working, so it's actually been a lot of discussion in policy circles around that. And I appreciate the flag. I do want to ask if there are any other clarifications that staff want to make on anything else, Alyssa or John?
Just one. In terms of where does it say you can amend the regional plan? Any plan can be amended, so we cannot legally limit anybody from proposing a plan amendment to an area plan, a regional plan, private project. Doesn't mean we have to approve them, but we do have to process them. That's called due process, and Graham can give you a lot more on that than I can. I'm just a planner pretending to go along.
Great. Okay, so in terms of moving forward on this item, do we want to, maybe we can take it offline and get our specific questions, make sure we communicate those to the city so we don't take up any more time right now. Do we need a motion to table it or
continue it?
Mr. Chair, this is Graham St. Michel. I would recommend just to, we should go back and probably complete public comment on the first item that we tabled. I think that'd be a good idea, just to give members of the public one more chance. If, some of those comments were already made, but we did kind of end that discussion. May give that chance and then take a roll call vote to continue any or all three of these items to the
Okay.
next meeting.
Yeah, I was thinking we were gonna go back still to that one. Should we go on to item, what are we on now? We would be on item 4, or do we want to have that, hear that presentation and public comment on that, or do we just move on?
I think the preference from staff from both the city and TRPA is that we just move on. And
Okay.
we'll come back to that next month.
So then should we do as Graham stated and just go to item 3 and take public comment on that, since we've had some committee time? And then we come
Yes.
back to committee comments.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, great. Sorry, this has been I'm not at my best being so jet lagged, and this has been a back and forth mix up here of this. So I just want to confirm what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to move to public comment on agenda item 3, which is the changes to chapter 13 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances, the goals and policies of the regional plan regarding the review and potential approval process for local jurisdiction area plans that propose alternate density and height limits in centers. Information again on this can be found on page 109 of the packet. So we'll go to public comment on this. If any member of the public wishes to address the Regional Planning Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Any members in the room wish to speak on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one member in the room.
Okay, great.
For record, my name is Deepak Sharma. I am actually talking way beyond I thought, but every time things come up that seems like unreal, measured, for all the talk about affordable housing in this whole basin, the only one thing that really meaningful happened is Measure T. Okay, nothing else, for all, it's been all just talk. Now in real estate, since the Measure T passed, I follow the real estate market. There are lots of projects, they haven't moved a needle. And you're asking to see what impact Measure T made. In real estate, things take decades before you see their impact. Today, the very best you can see is the trend. If people cannot rent their house as short-term rental, what are they doing? If they are renting it to locals, it is housing coming back to locals. If they are just waiting out till the interest fall down, I don't know if you follow the real estate market, people are not selling homes because they're locked into 30-year 3% rate. And right now the rate is 7%. It's gonna take years before you see the impact of Measure T. Eventually, either those people will rent it to locals or sell, or they will come to Tahoe every weekend, or they are rich people, they can afford to have that home sit vacant for a whole year and come here a few weekends. But it's not gonna be today. You're not gonna see the impact of it, especially in this high interest market. People are not selling. They're locked into, the cheapest interest rate they've ever seen. It's gonna take 5-10 years and maybe another turn where the interest rate come down to 3%. And you see if these people sell or not. Please, there is no free money other than Sugar Pine, which was built by state. There is no private money in that. It's built by state and tiny bit contribution from city. Nobody is building $1 million home and renting it for $1,000. It doesn't even pay for the California property taxes. Means, please, 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 you cannot be making policies when you are floating on the clouds. Please come down to the ground. How can you rent a unit that costs $1 million to build? Its property tax per month is more than the rent it collects. So that's all I have to say. Please. too high talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Anyone else in the room? Sorry.
There's no one else in the room to make
Oh.
public comment.
Anyone online?
There are 5 hands raised online.
Okay.
The first hand is Doug Flaherty. Doug, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you, Doug Flaherty, TahoeCleanAir.org. This was really an amateur display to try to force this down the throats of the entire Lake Tahoe Basin and all of its area plans. It wasn't well thought out. It was vague, subjective, and highly controversial. TahoeCleanAir.org hereby adopts by reference and the comments that were submitted to the TRPA by the Sierra Club Tahoe Area Group, dated November 19th, 2024. We adopt those as if they were our own comments. Also, TRPA and its partners, including the various area plan counties, continue public peril land use planning policies and projects within very high fire hazard severity zones by promoting increased height, density, and coverage throughout our cherished Tahoe Basin, and specifically concentrated town centers, of which will result in increased public peril evacuation choke points during a fast-moving wildfire. This while purposely ignoring any discussion whatsoever concerning the roadway threshold capacity needed to safely get the public out, and you continue to violate CEQA and your own regional code of ordinances. So in keeping with some of the California appellate court decisions more recently, I want to say this: no public agency, including this body, should be allowed to make it harder for people to escape deadly fires. So you really need to get a focus on the changing world out there. You can't keep stuffing however you think you can do it. It's just not going to work. When it comes down to it, life safety is going to trump subjective economic processes. I appreciate the board's, finally, one of the first meetings in years where this board actually asked some hard questions. And I don't always, of course, agree with the board, but I do appreciate Shelley and Vince and others who early on pointed to data. We can't continue these subjective processes. We have to make our decisions on data. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Next up.
Next hand up is Steve Teixeira. Steve, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Steve Teixeira on behalf of Tahoe Chamber. I think what we learned from today was that putting the Chapter 13 amendments in front of the actual details of the proposed area plan amendments created some confusion on the part of the committee and others, I'm sure. So just a thought that when this comes back, if there's going to be the 3 items, the 2 area plan amendments and Chapter 13 amendments, it might be a better idea perhaps to have the area plan amendments presented first so that you could see what, quote, benefits we're getting before you consider the Chapter 13 amendments. Just a suggestion when this comes back. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, I guess.
Next hand up is Ann Nichols. Ann, please unmute to make your comment.
Yeah, Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance. I completely agree with Steve, which is rare, that, yeah, this has to be separate. These are 2 different items. You can't rush all this stuff through. And, you can't keep doing this kind of thing. So it's sloppy, as Doug said, and really, I'm just hoping that it's a serious issue. It's a huge amendment to the regional plan. We don't want to see any more spot zoning, and but this isn't about clarification. This is still about what a developer wants, which is in this case, City of South Lake Tahoe, but take it separately. And the other thing is, I'm very worried about the counties. The reason the TRPA was created was so that the counties and the states wouldn't be in charge because they're all motivated by money. So that was shown yesterday at the approval for Palisades in the Palisades Ski Resort in Placer County. So what I'm worried about is the area plans are going to come forward without a project too. Learning from TRPA. Oh, this isn't a project. This is just general items, no guardrails, and no specificity. And then, oh, we'll wait till the project comes forward to see if it's too high and see if it's too dense. We need, is the regional plan just a bunch of words? Maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next up.
Next hand up is Ellie Waller. Ellie, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you, Ellie Waller. I'm hoping all of you read the comments or at least listened to the APC meeting. They did and were confused. Singular words like may approve instead of may consider surfaced. Did the initial environmental checklist really evaluate potential impacts? Could the findings be flawed? Along with weakening the incentives for developers to build deed-restricted housing. Furthermore, concentrating additional density in centers basin-wide has never been evaluated for the local nexus of just too many people in one place. This does vary between communities. Add the short-term rental concentration that has never been analyzed, and it's a recipe for disaster. Allowing short-term rentals parking, but not employees or hotel guests is an inequity and nonsensical. So is this now the new normal? Number one, approve a project, then fix the code. Number two, provide an application for an area plan, proposed exceedance. It really doesn't make sense. I found a quote from Mr. Stock from a recent set of minutes. Despite its importance, we haven't previously had a definition or a specific standard for mixed use. This previously was brought forward during the Project 947. Again, it was then stated by, or before stated by Executive Director Reagan in December of 2022 during the South Shore Latitude meeting, we should be doing things better. This particular kind of activity continues. The subjectivity and allowed interpretation of code leads the Advisory Planning Commission, your committee, the governing board, down past to approval. That doesn't make any sense as well. So proposing and allowing flexibility, increased height and density that benefits projects without applications also doesn't make any sense until it comes to permit. Example, the Barton Hospital is a hot mess. It's driving the height. This piecemeal approach must stop now, and you as a governing body need to acknowledge that furthering these types of amendments should require regional analysis, not one project or one area plan at a time. And I will finish up. If approximately 375 amendments in Chapter 1.8 since 2013 to various code chapters cannot be applied to projects, then the regional plan must be updated through a proper environmental impact analysis and study now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's one more hand raised. Sophia Heydrich, please unmute to make your comment.
Good afternoon again, Sophia Heydrich with Mountain Area Preservation. I just wanted to clarify the question that I had posed in the last agenda item. Mr. Hester, I believe he was trying to respond to my question, but unfortunately, I don't think he understood what I was asking. Of course, TRPA can make regional plan amendments and process area plan amendments for local jurisdictions. My question is, does the TRPA's regional plan right now include language that allows local jurisdictions to propose height and density standards that supersede TRPA standards? I didn't see any policies in the regional plan that allow for height and density increases above the TRPAs, except in very specific circumstances. And town centers and entire area plans wasn't in that list of circumstances. So if staff could speak to that question, it would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
No other hands raised. Okay, well then we'll close public comment. Would staff like to respond to anything? Any of the public comments before we move on?
Well, there in chapter 13, there are 4 different, I don't remember what they all specifically are, but 4 different provisions under that table in chapter 13 that describe circumstances where the table can be exceeded. So that's one place. Obviously, the phase 2 housing amendments were another place, off the top of my head. But anyway, I think that kind of answers the question.
Okay.
And this is Graham St. Michelle. To Sophia's point, I mean, part of the chapter 13 proposal here is in a way to announce announce that policy. So I mean, just to echo Sophia's point, that is part of what this action would have been, is an announcement of a policy that TRPA is willing to consider additional height and density in area plans.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Mr. Chair.
yes.
This is Cindy Gustafson. I just wanted to thank staff and the city for coming forward, because the whole point to me of committee work is exactly what's going on. It's not pretty to make the sausage. Often we have to debate issues and hear from our public and debate the issues again. But that is what committees are about, so that hopefully we work this out appropriately to bring to the governing board. So I understand it's frustrating to the public to see how the sausage is made sometimes, that it does take a few iterations to get all of our questions answered. But I appreciate that we have these opportunities at a little bit less formal setting, although very formal, to work on these key issues, because we can't solve them on our own, clearly. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee member comments? Okay, hearing none or seeing none. So to table this, do we need a motion to table it, or do we just move on? I'm sorry.
I think a motion, Chair, a motion and a roll call vote, and we could say a motion to continue the 3 items as they were agendized today to the December meeting.
Okay. Would anyone like to make that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to table items 3, 4, and 5 as enumerated on the TRPA Regional Planning Committee agenda this afternoon.
Okay, great. Any discussion on that motion?
I'm sorry, maybe an amendment to the motion.
And to continue that to either a future regional planning or board meeting.
No time specific.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
And I approve those amendments to my amendment.
All right. Maria, do you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Salding,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson,
Yes.
Mr. Keycapper,
Yes.
Ms. Loomer,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemeyer, and Mr. Honigman.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. That was a lot. Let's see. So now we are on to agenda item number 6, upcoming topics. As a reminder to the public, since this item is informational only, members of the public are welcome to comment at the final public comment item. So John, do you want to present?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hester here. Besides the item that's just got continued, or the 3 items that just got continued, there will be some phase 2 amendments for both Douglas and Placer County coming early in the spring. The Douglas County South Shore Area Plan will probably be coming in two pieces. One is some general amendments, and then one is for the Health Services District, which would be separate. And we anticipate the city of South Lake Tahoe will be providing you an information presentation as they work on their city of South Lake Tahoe Midtown Area Plan, and possibly an info presentation on the TED, which is the Tahoe El Dorado County Area Plan, but it's going by the name TED now. So lots coming forward in 2025.
Okay.
Maybe the end of 2024 as well.
All right, great. Thank you. Any comments from committee members on upcoming topics? All right, then we'll move on with the agenda, as that was informational only. So we're now on agenda item number 7, committee member comments. Do we have any comments from committee members? All right, hearing none, we will move on. Also, that was informational only. So that brings us to our final matter of business, our general public interest comment period. Any member of the public wishing to address the Regional Planning Committee on any item listed or not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Individuals or groups who have already commented on the items listed on the agenda are not permitted to comment on the same topic. The Regional Planning Committee is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public during this public comment period. Finally, comments must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the agency. If any member of the public wishes to speak at this time, please raise your hand now, either in person by clicking the raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Do we have any people in person who would wish to make a comment?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
All right. Do we have any hands raised?
We have 2 hands raised online. The first
Okay.
hand up was Doug Flaherty. Doug, please unmute to make your comment.
Thank you. Doug Flaherty, TahoeCleanAir.org. With regard to process, this is not a debate on previous agenda items, but we have a new process, a motion that was just been made. At the very last minute, Director Reagan suggested that the motion be changed to state that this would be brought forward in a future committee meeting or a board meeting. Please don't do this. Take it back to the Regional Planning Committee. Please don't take it straight to the board meeting, because the public's not going to have an opportunity to see for sure what type of changes have been made before this reaches the governing board. So please bring this back to the Planning Committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Our next hand is...
The last hand raised is Ellie Waller. Ellie, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, Ellie Waller. I echo exactly what Mr. Flaherty just said. I caught the same thing. This "or" has got to go. This needs to come back to your committee so you are satisfied, as well as the public being satisfied, that these things have been properly vetted, so there is no more further confusing another body of people. Today's process unfolded I don't know, in another way that we need to figure out, and it's happened in the past. The public has been put last when they want to comment. Not that I'm not interested in what's going on in the South Shore area planning process, but a perception is what unfolded is there was explanations made, and if you didn't table item 3, my perception is it could have influenced you allowing this to be piecemealed for the city, and it's nonsensical if you're trying to streamline a process and you are trying not to spot zone. You can't have it both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Did any other hands go up? Or is that?
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
All right, well then we will close public comment. And our final item is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, the motion passes. The meeting is adjourned at 1:40 p.m. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the people from the city.